All right, everybody, look at that picture right there. Look at this picture. And then, oh my gosh, it's steak. And this is y'all. And we're going to talk about all of this with yours truly. And yours truly is the Barbecue Barrister. I got my official Barbecue Barrister hat turned backwards, and we're ready to go. Just kidding, as we are going to talk about steak with our Barbecue Barrister, Matt Heermans. I'm Jon Rawl. I'll get rid of the catcher look. And we're going to bring on Matt Heermans to the All Southern program right now to talk about steak. Hello, Barbecue Barrister. Let's talk steak if you don't mind.
Hello, Mr. Rawl. I'm ready to talk steak, and I want to say I appreciate your headwear solidarity there for a few minutes. I felt loved for a moment.
You should feel love. I love hats. You love hats, but you have kind of a distinctive look there. In fact, you're sporting a hat I haven't seen you wear here lately, and I thought you might be stuck to your backwards trucker hat that we've seen you wear for quite some time. Do you wear a hat oftentimes when you're grilling? Is that sort of the regimen, the uniform of the day when you cook?
You know, I've always been a hat guy, so I have a hat on most of the time, I would say. Not, indoors, certain occasions, no, but if I'm just messing around or if I'm outside or just cruising around the house, I'm usually wearing a hat. I like to keep it a little bit interesting, so, I like to keep the shade out of my face. That way, it doesn't look like I'm hiding something, so that's why I've got it on backwards. I don't have any history as a professional baseball catcher. Yeah, I like to change it up from now and then. There's really nothing like a hat that fits right. And it's hard to find a hat that fits right. When you find a few, you got to roll with those.
Well, unfortunately for me, but fortunately for you, Matt Heermans, you're a good looking guy. So, hat or no hat, you're doing all right. We're here with you, sir, to talk about steak, and we're going to have a good time as we dissect steak. And this whole conversation, Matt Heermans, comes to us because it was not long ago here on the show that we were talking, I think, about barbecue, something we liked to talk about, which, by the way, I got a new moniker for you. You put the fine in swine. How does that sound?
Ooh, I like that. I like that. Anything rhymes with swine. You had me at swine.
Okay. Well, you're good at swine, but you're maybe even better at beef. And so where's Robert Mitchum when you need him to say beef? It's what's for dinner. And we want to talk about beef and we want to talk about steak. So we're going to dive into the options. And I'm going to pull up this graphic again. I don't know if you know that on a clock there's 12 different hours of the day. Well, according to our beef clock, Matt Heermans, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, I think there's 12 hours in a day, or 12 hours. There's 24 hours in a day, but 12. I think you know what I'm talking about. On our beef clock that I'm about to pull up, it's kind of like a clock, but unless you tell me wrong, according to this clock I've pulled up, they're around in a circle, kind of like a clock, but there's only 11 different cuts of steak. Does that sound right? Does that sound right to you? Starting off with, go ahead.
I mean, if you told me to name the 11 right now, I'd probably start sweating like I was taking an exam. But I mean, that sounds about right.
All right, let me. I may butcher, pun intended, some of the pronunciations here. I think one is a port. I can't read, port roast, maybe port something, followed by, and it comes out of the section between the rib and the flank. There's a small section kind of in the middle of a cow. Do you know what that is?
Is it a port roast? Is like a hanger steak, maybe?
I think you might be right. Short loin. It comes from the short loin section of the cow.
Okay, yeah, short loin. That is you could.
I'm sorry. Porterhouse is what it is. My apologies.
Oh, okay.
This whole whole English language thing's just kicking my butt.
No, I've been doing Rosetta Stone too. I'm just now catching on. But the porterhouse. You know what a porterhouse is? People say, what's the difference in a porterhouse and a T-bone? And the answer to that is
I don't
nothing.
know. What is it? Nothing?
Yeah, the porterhouse is just bigger. Um, so we could probably, I know T-bone's probably on there, but the cool thing about a porterhouse or a T-bone steak is everybody knows what it looks like. You got the T, and then you've got the middle bone, and you got meat on either side, right? You kind of got a cross, and you've got two meats. So what's cool about the porterhouse or the T-bone steak, it's the best of two different worlds, because on one side you've got a strip, right? You've got what we call a New York strip steak. That's one side of the bone. That's the longer, the bigger piece of the T-bone of the porterhouse. And on the other side, the smaller side, that's a fillet. So that is a piece of the what we call the beef tenderloin. So that's what's really cool about those kind of steaks. Porterhouse, when you talk about a porterhouse, that's just a big fat T-bone steak. It's pretty awesome. It's got a nice layer of fat around the outside, which of course caramelizes and renders whenever you cook it at an incredibly high rate of heat. But yeah, very cool steak. If you can't decide between a strip or a fillet, or yeah, strip or fillet, then just get a T-bone or a porterhouse, because you got both of them. Or if the wife wants a fillet, you're like, it's not quite fatty enough, not a whole lot of flavor. It's a little healthy for me. There you go, porterhouse steak.
On our graphic that we have up on our video, the T-bone is to your left, stage left there next to the porterhouse, and you can see that T there of that particular cut of meat. And according to this graphic, and I think I heard you confirm this, the T-bone and the porterhouse both come out of the short loin of the cow.
Yeah, they come from the same place. It's just they're just, one's big. Porterhouse means big giant T-bone.
And the quality of meat is essentially exactly the same? The
Yeah,
toughness?
it should be the same. Yeah, every steak you're going to have is going to have different qualities, or pardon me, different levels of quality. So you're going to have Angus, you're going to have choice, select, you're going to have prime. So yeah, that's what's going to determine the quality. But either way, you're going to have that bone in the middle, fillet on one, strip on the other. Beautiful piece of meat.
All right, well, let's move on our clock of great steak options. We talked porterhouse, we've talked T-bone, and then coming out of the tenderloin section and the sirloin section, you got sirloin steak, and then that fillet also from that same upper portion of the bovine. Difference between sirloin steak and a fillet?
Huge difference.
Okay, well, tell me, sir.
Pocketbook is price is one of them. Sirloin is going to be one of your more affordable, maybe a regular kind of a family style steaks, not something that you're typically going to order at a steakhouse. Filet is a fancy name, filet mignon, of course, French. But what it really is a beef tenderloin, which is a long piece of meat. If you've seen a whole beef tenderloin, most people probably haven't. You can buy them. They're usually $150 or so. It's a very long piece of meat, and a filet mignon is simply slices of that cut into steak-like chunks. So it's a beef tenderloin cut into that filet type steak. Filet, we'll talk about the sirloin in a second. A filet mignon, the reason it's famous, the reason people love it, is because it is very, very lean and is extremely tender. The reason it's very tender is because that is one of the least used muscles on the cow. The cow just doesn't use that muscle very much at all, so it just kind of hangs out, doesn't get tough, doesn't get stretched, doesn't get leathery, if you will. It's just a very lazy muscle. It's very tender. It's an extremely tender piece of meat. Of course, they have different types of steaks. They have Wagyu, Kobe, prime, all these different types of steaks. But either way, a filet mignon is always going to be tender, very, very lean. If you like fat, if you think fat's flavor, probably not your most flavorful steak, but your most tender steak for sure. A sirloin is like I say, totally different. It's not part of the beef tenderloin. Beef tenderloin is a round piece of meat. Sirloin is just another part of the cow. You can get a good sirloin steak. This is generally one of your cheaper steaks to get at the grocery store. But if you get one that's Angus, or even maybe there is such thing as a prime sirloin, and those are usually still relatively inexpensive.
Right.
A little bit more fat marbling. Not a bad steak for a day-to-day basis.
Okay, we are talking steak. Steak alert here with our barbecue barrister, Matt Heermans. I am Jon Rump. And thank you. Well, no, I'm sorry. My last name's not Rump. It's Rawl, but it's a 4-letter word that starts with R. Hey, we got to talk about rump, Matt Heermans, because that is a section of the cow's posterior, and that is a choice of meat. Rump I guess that's where rump roast comes from. Tell me about rump and what do you think about it?
Yeah, so rump roast, and that's what, like you said, most people think of a rump roast. That's a very popular cut. Okay, you would not want a slice of a rump to make a steak. It's going to be tough.
Oh,
It's going to be extremely tough. There's not going to be a lot of marbling. There's a lot of connective tissue in there. Uh, but what you do use the rump for, and it's exactly what you think it is, by the way, like you alluded to. But you want to cook it like a pot roast. You want to do something that is a low, slow, like a braise, something that cooks in its own juices for a very, very, very long time and starts to fall apart. So a rump roast, perfect for a pot roast. There's no piece of meat called a pot roast. There's different chunks of meat you can use as a pot roast. Of course, you cook it in a pot, a lot of times a crock pot or a pressure cooker or something like that. But you don't want to slice up into a rump roast. You're going to be chewing for a very long time unless you cook it for a very long time. But fine piece of meat for a roast, for a pot roast, but not steak worthy. And of course, the word steak, all that really means is a rectangular piece of meat that's cut off any part of the cow that you can cook evenly and eat like a steak. That's really all it means.
gotcha. Duly noted. We're talking about the various options of steak here with our barbecue barrister. And as we walk around the clock of great steak cuts, we move from the rump to a flank steak, as the flank is that bottom portion toward the back, and you've got the flank steak coming from that section. Difference between the flank steak and other cuts of beef from a cow.
Yeah, the flank steak is a thin slice of meat. You're exactly right. It's kind of from the belly area towards the back part. That's the cow's flank. Um, Usually you'd see flank steak marinated. There are Korean dishes that people do. It's like bulgogi is one of them. We're kind of I'm definitely not an Asian food expert. We're a Southern show. So think of something you've had like a fajita, for instance. That can be flank steak. It could also be strip steak, very similar, skirt steak. Very similar piece of the animal from similar areas. Thin, you really need to tenderize it. You either pound it out or you marinate it in some type of citrus juice that will tenderize the meat. Can be tough, a lot of flavor. It's a fatty piece of meat, very thin. So very good in certain types of things. You want to slice it. Think fajitas when you think flank steak.
All right. Make sure you hear me out here. Don't think I'm perving on you. I'm going to have you talk about skirts for a minute. Skirt steak, as that comes
Yes.
from a certain portion. Is that out of the what portion of the cow is that?
It's over there by the flank. It's also a skirt steak is very similar. It is a thin cut, also used very, very commonly. In fact, this is the most common thing to use for beef fajita meat. If you've ever, and most of us have had fajitas somewhere in our lives. Skirt steak is the most popular piece of meat to cook for fajitas. Again, thin, can be tough if you don't tenderize it. Can be a little tough if you don't maybe marinate it with something that'll break down some of that connective tissue. But very, very flavorful. Takes flavor very well. Really nice over a charcoal fire. You want to serve a skirt steak somewhere around medium rare to medium. And like I say, think about fajitas. Think of that thickness. Think of that type of meat when you think of skirt steak.
All right. Upon further review of our beef clock, there it looks like they indicate skirt steak coming from the plate portion of a cow. Why in the world would it have that name? Plate.
Flat.
Okay. All right. Plate, which is sandwiched between the flank and the brisket portion of the cow.
So,
And
yeah,
from
so mid belly. If you think of the brisket like my chest here, and you think of the
let
flank
me
kind
see
of
that
back towards
chest. Show it off here.
here, we'll button the top button here. How about that? Yeah. So if you think of the flank being back by the pants, and you think of the brisket being up by the neck, then yeah, the skirt's going to be there in the middle, right at the belly.
Okay. Sorry, everybody. We've gone from talking about skirts to Matt Heermans' belly. Hope you don't mind. So we go from the brisket now to the flat iron, and that's up around the chuck portion of the cow. What's the difference between the flat iron and the rest of the cow?
The flat iron steak. This is a steak that is becoming increasingly popular. It's not expensive. A flat iron steak is not expensive cut. When you say it's up by the chuck, You're right. It's kind of close to the cow's shoulder, and that is not an expensive cut of meat. However, when it's done properly, if it is tenderized, if it is a good piece of meat, it can be extremely flavorful. So a lot of these kind of cuts, we're talking skirt, we're talking flank, flat iron steaks. A lot of these cuts may not be the most tender or the most desirable for a lot of people, but they can be the most flavorful if cooked right. So you can pound it out. Again, if it's a high quality piece of meat, if it's a prime piece of meat, if it's an Angus, if it's marbled well, extremely flavorful piece of meat. Maybe not the most tender cut. It's not going to be a fillet. It's not going to be a prime ribeye per se, but extremely flavorful piece of meat and affordable as well. If you've never tried one, you should try it. If your butcher has one, season it well. You don't want to cook it past medium. It'll turn into chewing gum. But if you keep it medium, medium rare, really interesting and flavorful piece of meat. Very beefy flavor.
Matt Heermans, I have to ask you, after looking at that diagram of the brisket, at least according to that little picture there on our beef clock, it looks like a nice little piece of meat. And is that when you go in and get a brisket at a place, they just cut that thing as is, and that's what ends up being a brisket served on a plate is just that sort of coming out of the cow, chop it up. There you have it.
Yeah, absolutely. A brisket is a large piece of meat. When it goes on the smoker, it's a big chunk of meat. It's got the point, which is the fat end, and that we've kind of talked about that before. Lots of fat, lots of connective tissue. The point is my favorite part of the brisket, and I think a lot of pitmasters love that point. But then the flat is the rest of it. When you typically have slices of flat, but it's very large piece of meat, sliced or chopped afterwards. Exactly, exactly.
All right, now we go to the final segment of the cow that we need to break down, and you got a couple of different of options coming from this portion of the cow, and that's the rib portion of the cow. And there you find the tomahawk, and then kind of going back to a ribeye steak portion. And what about the difference of quality of meat between tomahawk, ribeye, and then you got that T-bone also, I think, coming somewhere in that area?
Yeah, so both the similarity, I guess, between a bone-in ribeye or a tomahawk ribeye. Tomahawk ribeye is kind of a cutesy little thing. It's a bone-in ribeye steak, but it's got the giant beef rib bone sticking out of it, so it kind of looks like a Fred Flintstone type of. It's a presentation thing. Put it that way. It kind of looks like a tomahawk. It's got the handle, which is the beef rib bone. So
Mm-hmm.
the tomahawk steak is a ribeye steak. It's a bone-in ribeye steak. The ribeye, of course, comes from the rib portion of the cow, as opposed to the T-bone, the porterhouse. They both have bones with them. These are a couple of the only steaks you'll get that have a bone, but totally different pieces. You've got a strip and a fillet on the porterhouse, and the ribeye, bone-in, tomahawk, whatever it's called, is a ribeye. It's from the rib portion. My favorite steak, personally, is a ribeye steak. I think there's a lot of folks out there. It is a very fatty steak. It has a lot of fat kind of marbled into it in the center of it. And if you cook it properly, that fat kind of renders into a creamy, buttery boatload of flavor, right? Probably the most flavorful steak you can get. Now, not everybody's cup of tea because it is a very fatty steak. It's a cut that you will end up eating fat. If you try to trim all the fat off a ribeye, you might as well not even do it. But very fatty, lots of flavor. Get close to the rib there. You're talking lots of marbling. Like I say, a bone-in ribeye is pretty much for presentation. It's got that big old beef rib bone sticking out because that's where it comes from.
All right. Well, we've just walked through, according to our beef clock there, 11 different choices of beef when it comes to going in and getting a steak. And I think we all deserve a steak after this delicious conversation. And you just heard Matt Heermans declare that he's kind of a ribeye kind of guy. And I'm still looking. Call me a searcher, Matt Heermans. I'm still trying to find myself. I want really good steak. I don't mind a little bit of fat, but I don't like paying $100 for a steak and 40% of it was stuff I had to chew and spit out because it was fat. Help me
You
out.
know what?
Help me out.
Yeah, I don't. I think, yeah, if you got to do that, that's no offense to wherever the last steak you ate, John, but if you got to do that, even with the fat, that's not probably not the best steak. But
And
I'm thinking for you, you do like a little bit of fat. You like that flavor, but you're probably not a ribeye guy. You're probably not going to enjoy the kind of the jiggly rendered buttery fat with the charcoal crust on it. That's for me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's for ribeye people. I'm thinking you're somewhere in the middle. I'm not calling you a centrist by any means,
Am I
but I'm saying
moderate?
that you might be a moderate. I'm thinking a strip steak is perfect for you. You got a little bit of fat marbling.
Oh, don't tell me one of them New York strip steaks. Is that what you're
I,
trying to reference?
hey, how about a Dixie strip?
Oh,
Um, totally different steak. It comes from Southern Cal, John. That's the thing.
Southern
So
cow as in
yeah,
COW?
yes. It comes. Yes, a strip steak from a Southern cow is no longer a New York strip steak. This is
Okay.
science. But yeah, I think that's probably right up your alley. A little bit of fat, nice marbling, but not big old chunks.
All right, somebody call down to the local steakhouse. You just heard what he said. That's what I'm getting for supper here whenever I get a couple of dollars in from my coronavirus stimulus check. Matt Heermans, let me know. Okay, we hear all about Angus steak. And Angus essentially, and I don't mean to sound like a doofus, I'm also an ambassador for everybody here. I'm an ambassador for all y'all. And so I'm asking dumb questions because there's got to be somebody out there who may not know the answer to these questions. That's why I'm firing them away to you, sir. Angus is a type of cow, correct?
Correct.
I didn't go to a
Absolutely.
cow college, so therefore, that's why I got to ask these questions.
Yes, Angus is a type of beef. I mean, it is a breed of cow. It is not a it's not a designation like select, choice, prime. Those are USDA designations, basically that essentially they determine the quality, and what the quality means is how much fat marbling you have in the steak. Something with no fat marbling is going to be way down on the quality scale. Something with a lot of fat marbling is going to be way up there on the high scale.
Okay.
Angus is just a type of cow. Um, it does make for good meat. I mean, there is no specific designation for how much marbling or something goes into Angus. It's a branding thing,
Okay.
John. It's something that is taken off, that people have put Angus on packages, and that has come to signify something that's supposed to be a little bit better than your average piece of meat. And hey, it's worked out great because you see 100% Angus and this, that, and the other. I've never had a chance to compare it to, say, choice or select meat side to side, but uh, people say it's better. It's its own thing. It's its own brand. It's its own kind of cow. And if you like it, then you like it. That is what it is. Yeah.
But an Angus cow is going to also break down into those 11 sub choices we were
Oh
just
yeah.
telling you about. So, my question is if you choose, let's say, a less than desirable portion of the cow, a rump, I guess they market Angus rump, and it's supposed to be better than your run of the mill cow?
I guess, like I say, the whole Angus thing. If you research a little bit, it's very funny. It is a branding
Okay.
thing. It is a particular kind of cow that I guess people who breed Angus cows. And if you're an expert, you could tell if you are a cattle breeder, you could probably tell me, look, this is why an Angus cow has better meat. This is why we brand it this way. And I'm sure there's an argument for that.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, you're not gonna there's such thing as a prime rump. You're not gonna be able to eat that as a steak either. So
Okay.
it's not gonna make any difference. It's just that you're gonna have a cut of meat that's edible as a steak, no matter what the quality level, or else you got chewing gum.
Again, we're asking the tough questions here. We are 60 minutes for the South. We're going to make Matt Heermans cry one of these days. So we
I'm
have,
tearing up right now.
yeah, we have Angus. Is there another breed of cow that is the most commonly found when you go shopping for meat in the grocery store? What other cows are generally found there? If it's not Angus, what is it?
Uh, well, Angus is one. There are other breeds. So if you think of a milk cow, that's generally a Holstein cow. That's the stripe, the black and white types of cow. You've got Brangus cattle, which is a different kind of cattle. You've got Brahma type, Brahma, like if you heard of a Brahma bull, I think
Yes,
it's
I
actually
have.
called a Brahma. Um, there's different type. Longhorn is funny. People don't eat Longhorn. I think a lot of folks think that you see these Longhorns maybe in Texas or some other place, and they're out there grazing to eat. You can eat it, but that is not a good type of meat. It's more of a decorative type animal. Very lean, can be tough, just not a very fatty. One of the there is a breed of cow, a Kobe a Kobe, pardon me, a Wagyu cow. They call it Kobe beef because it originated in Kobe, Japan. That type of meat,
Not Kobe
but a
Bryant.
Wagyu cow. It's not Kobe Bryant. No, we're R.I.P. and or yeah, R.I.P. But um,
Kobe Bryant was named after that place in Japan, by the way.
I think you're right. Yeah, that would be the
He,
only
he,
reason to do it. Yeah, KOBE.
no,
But
he
Wagyu
really
beef.
was named after that Japanese city. Okay,
Yeah,
back to steak talk.
yeah. So, man, you got all kinds of knowledge, my man. So yeah, Wagyu is another breed of cow that's very expensive. It's very fatty. You can find that at stores. You're going to pay a pretty penny for it, but very tender, very fatty. The one steak, John. It occurs to me right now is that we haven't talked about it. That's a hamburger steak.
Oh, how dare we? Did I miss that on
Yeah.
my clock? Is it kind of like
No.
forgotten about? It's the mystery meat?
Yeah, it's the kind of steak that we had growing up when my folks, my dad didn't have a great month at the office. It's hamburger. My mother used to put hamburger meat in a foil container with some veggies and cook it that way, and it's a hamburger steak, my man. Um, probably
Hamburg
your low, probably a low end, yeah, steak.
Yeah, and that's going to come if we bring back our little cow clock here. That particular choice of meat for hamburger steak, you're going to find that coming from the ribeye portion?
Hamburger meat can come from just about anywhere. A lot of times it's
Ah,
chuck. A lot of times it's chuck. So ground chuck is
okay.
very popular. About my favorite is 80% lean, 20% beef. So yeah, pretty much that portion of the cow.
Again, people, I apologize. I don't have that agricultural degree in cow studies. I'm working on it. And have you ever worked around cattle? Because I have not. Have you?
No,
Shame on you.
I haven't. I've just eaten a lot of them.
That I've done too. I'll tell you what, cow is a great creation. It is one of the real blessings we have that the good Lord's given us. And here we have spotlighted we know of at least 11 different cuts of steak. That's what we were really featuring here on today's Y'all show. And our barbecue barrister has done a fantastic job. And you know what, barbecue barrister? We've done such a good job breaking down all these steak options. We got to talk about some of the other fun parts of steak, but we're going to have to save that for another conversation. And I'm talking about how you get your steak ready, seasonings and tips.
Yes,
And I think that's going to get you just as excited as seeing that big old piece of meat waiting to be put on the grill.
that's a cliffhanger. I can't wait to talk about that. That's my favorite conversation, actually, right there.
But we're not going to let you go at least without asking a simple question. Is there a generally a certain temperature that you're going to use for just about all of these cuts of steak? Is there a temp that works for all of these?
Mm, well, I mean, it depends on how you like your steak.
Oh, darn it!
I'm a
All
medium.
these. This is just too complicated.
I'm a medium rare guy. That's about 130.
Really?
If you're rare, medium is around 135, 140. You get past that, I mean, I'm out. You get past medium, and I cannot condone that at all. So, but yeah, you want to keep it under 140, I would say.
Okay. And once it's at 140, it's ready to get off that grill, right?
Yeah, 140 is about medium. So that's going to be light pink center, warm in the middle. That's what most people. The medium rare is a little cooler center, dark red. That's about 130 or so. So I'd say between 130 and 140 is you don't want to go past medium. And no offense to anybody who likes their well done steak, I can't condone it. Not on this program.
Yeah. I mean, our days of being cavemen where we had to go out and kill and not fire up a grill are over with. Please, please, let's be human beings and at least cook it some, for goodness sake. Matt Heermans,
Yeah.
thank you very much. Have you had supper yet?
No, I'm starving.
Steak? Is that a possibility?
I wish. I wish. I thought earlier that what I was going to have for dinner was going to be good, but now I'm thinking, man, I wish I had a ribeye.
That Robert Mitchum fellow said steak is what's for dinner, I think, and I think he was right on that. I
I
reckon
learned
I got to settle for a Waffle House steak, which aren't that bad, to be honest with you.
that's not bad. That's probably either a sirloin or a flank.
I think you're right. I think you're right. I'll have to do my Waffle House research. Matt, our
Yeah.
barbecue barrister, man, what a great job. And in your honor, we'll wrap up this segment with our Matt Heermans look. And we'll talk to you again soon. And again, we'll have you share some of our great, infusion. What is that? Is that
We
some?
traded. We switched.
Oh, okay. Is that some kind of a swanky restaurant? What is infusion? Tell me.
Oh no, that's a brewery
Oh, even
somewhere.
better.
I can't remember where. I can't
See,
remember where.
all these breweries and restaurants and barbecue places just send you all their swag, and it's just the darndest thing. I mean, I'm envious of you. You're living the dream.
So, yeah, you're right. I am. Hey, just doing this show is the biggest part of it.
I think that's not a dream. That's a nightmare. Matt Heerman, thank you, and you have a great rest of your week, and we'll talk to you later. All
All
right.
right. See you later, John.
All right, and that will wrap up our steak conversation. And we appreciate all y'all being on the Y'all Show. And make sure you keep on tuning in. We got great guests. We got country music act out of the Delta of Mississippi, Southern Halo. They're going to be on with us. We also have Precious Harris with all the entertainment news and much, much more. All right here on the show that's all about the South, even great steak. Yes, oh yes, we have that covered big time. All right here on Y'all Accent on the South.